Thrilled to introduce someone very, very important for this event. This is the summit co-chair, Ricardo Anzaldua. He's Executive Vice President and General Counsel at MetLife. He is truly the visionary behind this event. He attended a Hispanic executive dinner, and he thought, why not gather graduates and leaders of our community who have attended such incredible universities, bring them together into this forum space. So between MetLife and Hispanic Executive, this partnership was created to make this endeavor possible. So I'd like to invite Ricardo to the stage, please.
Thank you so much, Eliana. That was a lovely introduction. And it takes away part of my speech. So I'll take the time that she saved me to tell a joke. I always like to begin with a little bit of levity. This is a joke that my mom told me. So two premises that come out of that. First, it's going to be clean. My mom was born in the 30s. She doesn't tell dirty jokes. But the second one is that my mom really is fond of really corny, absurd humor. So absurd that it requires a suspension of disbelief. So this joke is about a snail who enters a raffle. He's attending a fundraising benefit, enters a raffle to win the first prize in the raffle, which is a Ferrari, right? A Testarossa, beautiful red Testarossa Ferrari. And the snail puts his ticket in. Lo and behold, the snail's name gets drawn, and the snail wins the Ferrari Testarossa. And he goes up, he collects the keys. He says, can I take it to the body shop and have some painting done? The leader of the raffle says, of course, we'll have it delivered over there tomorrow. The next day, the snail goes to the body shop, and he says, on each door of this Ferrari Testarossa, I want a big white S painted. And the guy at the body shop says, well, it's your car. I'll have a big white S painted on each door. And he's writing up the order, and he just stops himself. He says, you know, you have one of the most gorgeous cars in the world here. Why would you want to paint an S on the side door? This car will go from 0 to 100 in 6 seconds. You can race down the FDR, and no cop will be able to catch you. You're going to be able to do things that nobody else can do in a car in New York, and you want to ruin it by painting an S. Why? Tell me, why do you want to paint an S on each door of this Ferrari? And the snail says, that's because when I go racing down the FDR at 4 o'clock in the morning, I want people to say, look at that S car go. So, going on to the serious part of the talk. Moving on to the serious part of the talk. I was asked to talk a little bit about what led to this event, and Eliana gave sort of the end of the story, which is, you know, sort of the magical moment when I was talking about this idea that I had about a networking platform for Latinos who had graduated from the elite institutions of our country. And how Pedro and Hispanic Executive took up the challenge to, you know, put this networking platform together, and what a brilliant job they've done in putting this together today. But really the idea for doing that wasn't something that occurred to me in the recent past. It really came out of my experiences first at Brown University as an undergrad and then at Harvard Law School, where, you know, we used to get together with the Latinos from the other schools. We used to do it on a regular basis because remember that, you know, kind of the motivation for all of this was for us to advance the cause of equality of opportunity. It was to advance the cause of access to opportunity. It was to advance the cause of empowerment for Latino communities. And that's what we saw as our role as sort of the pioneer Latinos who started attending these universities in the late 1960s and early 70s, when we used to be able to count the number of Latinos in the undergraduate population on the fingers of one hand, right? So there were just a few of us back in those days. And this is the way that we thought about things. And first of all, in order to have a sense of community, in order to have enough people to really sort of give ourselves a little center of gravity and a little bit of action focus, we needed to get together with each other from the other schools. And we met these other Latinos from the other schools, and invariably, it was an extraordinary experience. Meeting these other highly talented, highly motivated people who would fill you with enthusiasm and inspiration and just motivation to keep on moving forward and really drive forward these agendas that were so important to the Latino communities. And so that's why I thought, you know, this would be a really great thing to do. And in fact, back in those days, we used to say, this is such a wonderful experience. This is so inspiring. It is so powerful for us to get together. We need to keep doing it on a regular basis. But because it was the students themselves who were organizing this, it invariably dissipated. It invariably went away after, you know, just one meeting, and then it would be another 3 years before the groups would get together again and really sit down and talk about the issues that were so important to us. Issues like admission and financial aids and curriculum development for Latino curricula and for career placement when we were, you know, out of school and when we were in grad school. All these kinds of things that were designed to help us advance the agenda of what began as the civil rights movement. Remember, we were part of the civil rights movement at the beginning of all of this. And then civil rights kind of morphed into affirmative action. And then that kind of morphed into what we call today diversity and inclusion. But it's really all the same agenda. It's all the same agenda of equality of opportunity, of access to opportunity, and of empowerment for Latino communities all around the country. So this idea of, you know, pulling people together and utilizing the cross-pollination that comes out of having those kinds of events, those kinds of networking opportunities, and learning from each other, learning what's happening at our various institutions, and what kind of strategies work best in order to really change the face of the institutions and accomplish the kind of access and empowerment that we're talking about. So it's something that I've been talking about. This idea is something that I've been talking about for about 30 years. And, you know, I just really never really had the right platform until in 2013 when Hispanic Executive named me as one of the líderes for 2013, held an awards ceremony in Chicago, and over drinks after the ceremony, I talked about it with Pedro, and Pedro says, do you mind if I take that idea and try to run with it? And I said, by all means, go for it. And a couple months later, he had a proposal, and for, I guess, a few weeks, we worked together on the proposal and gave it some refinement and came up with the idea of getting some corporate sponsors for this meeting, which was really designed to attract people who are interested in careers in the private sector. So we're focused on that portion of our community that really is interested in sort of advancement and opportunity within private business institutions. I realize and recognize that our community has lots of other interests as well, and it's certainly appropriate for others who want to take this idea and use it in areas of academia and government and public interest and social service and all of that. All of those things would be welcome. And I think that this is really just sort of planting the seed of something that we can do in lots of different fields of activity. But you know, this particular event was focused on business because there is a particular agenda that we need to address in the private sector. It's a realization of that vision with the particular focus of advancing Latinos into positions of authority and power within businesses in the United States. And so you say, well, why? What is the need? Why have we pulled ourselves into this meeting with that particular agenda? So I would go back and I would say the answer to that question is a story of good news and bad news. You know, when we started down the path of access for minorities, access for Latinos in particular, into the resources of society, access to facilities and education, equality of opportunity, there were plenty of people in the society who disputed the need for that, who felt it was not appropriate for society to be taking steps on behalf of people of color or on behalf of women. They felt like it was the responsibility of the disempowered to empower themselves, and there wasn't any need for any kind of collective action. And we had plenty of overt racism that we had to confront as we went down the path of empowering ourselves. So, one thing that I think that we really need to recognize is that we've made a lot of progress. I mean, since 1970, we have now made a lot of progress. It is now socially unacceptable for people to be overtly racist in the big institutions of our society. Not accepted. You cannot be an overt racist and be a corporate leader. You cannot be an overt racist and be a law firm partner. It's just not accepted anymore. So that's, hats off to all of us who have been working on these issues for so many years. So we can point with pride to the general acceptance in government, in academia, in society at large, that for Latinos as well as other historically disempowered groups, diversity and inclusion are good, desirable, and valuable for our institutions and for society at large. That's the good news. So what's the bad news? The bad news is that even though the institutions in our society generally espouse the principle of diversity and inclusion, they don't really walk the talk. So if you look at the look at the institutions in society and look at the way that they perform in terms of really integrating themselves, in terms of really making sure that historically disempowered groups are part of the power structure, you see that really there's very little progress made. If you look at the top ranks of corporate institutions, you find very few Latinos. You find a few more women, but not really very many women, and very, very few African Americans. So, what happens when you talk to these institutions about their ability to actually integrate themselves, to actually bring people of color, Latinos, into positions of power? And their answer is, well, we want to do that, but we can't find the people. There are two aspects to that answer, and I think both of them need to be addressed. The first one, I'll say, is they say that the pool of candidates is not available. There are no qualified candidates. So I say, look around this room. What do you mean there are no qualified candidates? Just look around this room. There are thousands and thousands of qualified Latinos. This is just a small little slice of the extraordinary group of Latinos who have extraordinary talent, amazing educational backgrounds, amazing experience, accomplishments as long as your arm, and the candidates are really there. So the second element of that equation, the second element of why these corporations say that they can't find the qualified candidates, is that they're using exactly the same focus for choosing their leadership as they have historically used. So they want people who have a given collection of experience, for example. Well, it's one of those vicious circle, gotcha games. If nobody ever gets admitted to the inner circle, then nobody's ever going to have the experience that they're looking for. Lo and behold. So, that's part of it, that they kind of use the filtering criteria that actually lead to the result that you're always going to have a white male entering into the positions of senior leadership in the institutions. The other piece of it, though, is, I think, a little bit more insidious, and it deserves focus, and that is that oftentimes the lens that's used for choosing the next generation of leaders is the lens of cultural fit. And that's a code, right? Cultural fit is a code for people like me, right? People that I can relate to, that I'm comfortable with. And for a white male, the person he's most comfortable with is another white male. And that's really the vicious circle. That's the catch-22 that's going to prevent the institutions from ever integrating themselves, from ever becoming the kind of institutions that we want to see, institutions that embody the principles of diversity and inclusion. That aspect of the question we need to attack within our institutions. We need to broach the subject, we need to talk about it with courage, and we need to say, if you ever want this institution to be diverse and inclusive, you need to confront the issue of implicit bias, unconscious bias on the part of the leadership, and you need to make your institution and the leaders of the institution accountable for the retention and the advancement and the promotion of people of color and women within the institution. If we don't force the institutions to take that accountability, the change that we're looking for is going to take centuries. It really takes an affirmative decision that the leaders of the institutions are going to take responsibility for making sure that the diverse populations that we want to advance are actually advancing within the institutions. So at MetLife in legal affairs, I've made it a performance objective for every one of my senior leaders that they have to adopt a diverse professional in the organization to be their protege and to be accountable for the advancement of the top talent, diverse professionals in the organization. So we start by giving them a pool of people who have demonstrated their capability, a pool of people a lot like you, people who have excellent educational backgrounds, who have lots of intellectual firepower, who have lots of ambition and energy and desire to succeed. And we say, you're going to take one of these people and you're going to make sure that that person gets all of the experience, the exposure, the expertise, the training, in substantive areas, in technical areas, and in leadership areas, the emotional training about how to relate to other people in the organization, how to be an effective public speaker, how to project confidence and inspire confidence, how to be a leader who can actually lead in this organization. And it's going to be your responsibility, senior leader, to make sure that that individual advances along that curve of development so that they will actually succeed. And we will make sure that developing people that way, that we put extremely competent people on the path to leadership within our organization. So that's really, I think, what we have to do. That's the challenge for all of us here in this room. And really, kind of the objective of having this event and, getting us all together. It's in part so that we can meet each other and we can know what's going on at our respective institutions, so that we can exchange career opportunity with each other, so that we can exchange information. But it's also that we can exchange these kinds of ideas about how to transform our institution and continue to advance the objective of empowerment for our communities. So that's kind of what's behind this event. That was the reason for pulling this event together, the reason for creating this networking platform, so that we can continue to do the work that many of us started 40 years ago. Some of us started maybe a little more recently, Eliana. But it's really, a continuum. It's another step in the continuum towards accomplishing this goal of empowerment, of equal opportunity and access to opportunity that we've all been working on for so long. So, in conjunction with this event, we have a magazine that Pedro's organization has published. I trust that copies of it will be available soon. And I think that that some copies will be here, and it will certainly be accessed online. The idea of the magazine is really to be an electronic publication, and you can read the stories of the featured alumni, the success stories of Latino alumni from our elite institutions are contained in that magazine in a very sort of compelling and persuasive format. So that's our background. That's where we came from and how this event came together today. So I'll take a second to review the agenda with you. Following my opening remarks here, we're going to have a panel discussion about keys to success for Latinos in corporate America. The panelists will be Victor Arias, who's a senior client partner for Korn Ferry, Lisa Garcia Quiroz, Chief Diversity Officer of Time Warner, Elizabeth Nieto, who's Chief Diversity Officer for MetLife, Hernan Sainz, Managing Partner for Bain & Company, Anilu Vázquez Ubarri, who's Managing Director, Chief Diversity Officer, and Global Co-Head of Talent Development for Goldman Sachs, and Cesar Villalpando, Senior Vice President of Shared Services for Kaiser Permanente. After the panel, we'll have a short break, and then we will have our featured keynote address by Robert Sanchez, who's Chairman and CEO of Ryder Systems. And then we will close up with closing remarks from Heather Keneally, who is U.S. Business Lead for Facebook, and then some final thoughts from my compadre, Pedro Guerrero, from Hispanic Executive.